Welcome to Bare Bones Reads. I just got done reading this book, Black Unicorn by Tanith Lee. I love Tanith Lee and I love this book. And I found out about Tanith Lee from Deb at Omnivorous Reader. And I've been watching the videos that her and Chris at Liminal Spaces and Rob at SpaceArchives have been doing about all of her fairy tale retellings. And I've just been reading along with all those videos. It's been fantastic. And I just fell in love with Tanith Lee's prose. It's so beautiful and really gets my imagination going when I'm reading. So I started trying to buy up as many of her books as I could, which is hard because she's out of print and she's so popular. But I managed to get a hold of this and several other of her books, but I actually got this whole trilogy, so I'm excited to finish it. And I have a daughter, she's very little, but when I was reading this, I was getting really excited because I was thinking she might like to read this when she gets older because the protagonist is so awesome, and the protagonist is a girl. So yeah. The book is about a 16-year-old girl named Tanaquil, and she's stuck in her mom's fortress out in the middle of the desert. And her mother's this amazing sorceress who spends all day just conducting magical experiments. The way she's described, there are all these creatures coming out of her hair, like peeking out of her hair, and it made me think of like Jim Henson movies like The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and things like that. Her magic is described as being kind of smoky, like there's this real sort of fiery quality to her mom. She's got red hair. And she's obsessed with this idea of the multiverse, this idea that there are multiple worlds out there, and she's constantly using her magic mirror to seek the one perfect world. And yeah, that's basically her life's mission. And Tanaquil was tested to see if she could be a magic user when she was young, and it was determined that she cannot wield magic. And so her and her mom have sort of a distant relationship. They see each other, it sounds like, every day, but there isn't a lot of closeness there because there isn't a lot of interest overlap. Tanaquil, as it happens, is actually really talented when it comes to mechanics and can fix just about anything. And once she fixes something, whether it's one of the servants' toys or like a cannon or anything around the fortress, it never breaks again, which is really fascinating. And the mom, Jave, when she conducts all these magical experiments, apparently she's really messy with her magic, and so it's described as splashing throughout the fortress and splashing into the desert. And when it does this, it enchants people's clothing. So Tanaquil's always trying to find her clothes, and her clothes are always crawling into these weird corners. And it also enchants the animals, and one of these animals that gets enchanted is then able to speak because of its enchantment, and it's an animal called a peeve. And it's described as being kind of like, I guess, a desert fox, but I was picturing like a raccoon as well. And it starts finding these bones and bringing them to Tanaquil, and Tanaquil ends up following it to where it's finding these bones, and it's under this big stone arch in the desert. And she ends up unearthing all the bones and putting them together, and it creates a unicorn skeleton, and which I thought was metal. That was so cool. And the way the bones are described, it's really psychedelic. I was picturing like nebulas in the bones. They glow at night, like there's a moon glow to them. And I think that it's described as like there being like stars and things like that when you look at the bones. And so I'm going to get into spoilers here, just in case you're concerned about that from this point on. So she ends up putting all the bones together, and she creates a mechanism to make the bones move. They're hanging from chains. And I think the idea is she just thinks it would be cool to have this skeleton marching around, I guess. And so she finishes this right before there's a big dinner that her mom's putting on. And at the dinner, Tanaquil is looking at all the servants that are very old. Some of them are shaking as they're bringing food to the table. And she's just like thinking that's going to be her, that she's just not going to have a life. She's going to be stuck in this fortress for the rest of her life. And she's really unhappy, and these feelings really hit a kind of fever pitch. And right as that happens, the unicorn skeleton comes barreling out of her room, interrupts the dinner, destroys everything. The mom tries to cast a spell to subdue it, And what that does is it seems to regenerate the unicorn's skin, and it becomes a fully reformed unicorn, not just a skeleton anymore. And it leaps out the window, and Tanaquil leaps after it, and her adventure begins. And so she ends up lost in the desert. It's so cold in the desert at night that it snows, and so she barely survives making it to an oasis. And so she ends up getting to an oasis with the unicorn's help. It seems like this really kind of strange wild animal that will show up to help her, but it's really unpredictable. But it seems to come to her when she really needs it, and it gets her to this oasis where she ends up bartering passage with a caravan because she's like, holy crap, I'm finally out of here. I'm going to go where they're going. And so she ends up a part of this caravan where she's essentially fixing whatever they need fixed in order to have them help her get to the city. So she's riding in their caravans and things like that. And so when she gets to the city, she ends up meeting a princess who invites her to the castle. And this whole kingdom is right against the ocean. And she realizes that this princess is her sister. She realizes that the prince is her father. And this is where we see this fascinating juxtaposition of elements and also like personalities, and that Jave, like I was talking about, is this really fiery sorceress where there's all this smoke, and she's a fiery person. She's kind of unpredictable in temperament, but a good person, very intense. And then the father seems equally intense, but very chilly. And instead of the live animals that we see in like the sprites and demons and things like that the mom has, you see all these mechanical animals that the prince surrounds himself with, all these clockwork animals. And anything animal related that's real is something that he's wearing. So he wears a lot of furs. He wears a lot of clothing made from sea life. He has a cape made from shark skin that is clasped with 2 fossils from the ocean. And he seems like kind of an asshole, and he is really only fixated on power and ritual, and he doesn't really seem to have any love for his daughter, the princess. And Tanaquil does not like him and really can't picture him as her father. And Tanaquil ends up being invited to this big event that happens once a year, I believe, where they reenact this myth about a unicorn that came up out of the ocean before the kingdom was established and touched its horn to a rock and created the first wellspring in order for civilization to be able to take hold in this part of the world. And so they have this fake unicorn walk up to the prince down by the ocean. The whole kingdom gathers for this. And he goes to place a garland around its horn, and the real unicorn shows up, and there are storm clouds, and it sets fire. The unicorn sets fire to the whole event, and people run for their lives. And they just leave Tanaquil and her sister, the princess, to fend for themselves down by the water. And so they have to basically make their way back to the castle on their own. And when they get back, it's been determined by the prince's advisor that Tanaquil is responsible for this, that none of this would have happened if they hadn't let a witch into the palace. And so he decides that she needs to be killed. And Tanaquil's mother finds her just in the nick of time and sends a demon to retrieve her. And so she's saved from the clutches of the soldiers, and she's transported by the demon to the shore just outside of the castle. And right next to where Tanaquil is dropped, there's another arch, just like the one in the desert where Tanaquil found the unicorn's bones. And Tanaquil is visited by a psychic projection from her mother, and they have this really wonderful confrontation where they hash everything out. They hash out their differences. Tanaquil confronts her for making her feel neglected, because Tanaquil always felt like her mother kept her at arm's length and didn't really love her because she didn't share her magical ability. And Tanaquil's mother explains that, for a while there, she thought that she was just her father's daughter, because her father, even back when they were together before Tanaquil was born, the father was obsessed with mechanics and mechanisms and didn't have any kind of magical ability at all whatsoever. And so she just saw a reminder of her ex-lover in her daughter, it sounded like. But Jave tells Tanaquil that she realized that that Tanaquil is magical, and that she just hadn't seen it, and that Tanaquil is actually magical in her ability to mend things, that she just has this innate understanding of how to put things back together, and once she puts them back together, they don't break. They don't break again. And so what she says is that what Tanaquil's mother says to her is that this unicorn is from that perfect dimension that she's been seeking her whole life, and that Tanaquil is the only person who can mend the portals so that this unicorn can go home. And Tanaquil's mother says that these stone arches are portals, and that Tanaquil needs to repair them, and then the unicorn can go home. And Tanaquil's mother went so far as to say that she thought, even in its skeletal form, that the unicorn knew that Tanaquil had the ability to repair it, heal it, and send it home, and that's why this whole adventure was taking place. And I just thought that was really cool. So Tanaquil repairs the portal. I pictured it kind of like a big stone Stargate almost. And she repairs it, and the unicorn goes through, and the unicorn seems to beckon Tanaquil to come with her, and Tanaquil does. And she goes in with the Peeve, who's basically her familiar at this point. And they see this amazing dimension where there's absolutely like no predation at all whatsoever. There's no predator-prey dynamic. There are literally lions and lambs lying down together. That's like the only on the nose part of this book. But it's gorgeous, and it's ethereal and psychedelic. Some of the descriptions reminded me of C.L. Moore. There's dragons. There are floating cities in the sky populated by these golden fairy people. It was really gorgeous. And there's actually a passage that I want to read. It's maybe my favorite part of the book, and it's Tanaquil's description of what this feels like, that there's such strong harmony in the air, that Tanaquil feels as though she's been relieved of any kind of negativity or any kind of sadness, that it's just gone and she feels light. So I'm going to read that real quick. The mountains had drawn nearer, and the sun and its attendant stars were lower in the sky. A rose gold light, like that of a flawless late summer afternoon, held the world as though inside a gem. Again, as with everything, it was not that she had never seen such light the other side of the gate. It was that here nothing threatened or came between her and the light. In Tanaquil's world, the best of things might have a tinge of sadness or unease. Nothing was sure or quite safe. The light of the perfect world was the light of absolute truth, and Tanaquil, who had yearned in Jave's fortress for order, adventure, and change, knew that here there were other things. To be happy would not become sickly. To be at peace would not bore. Happiness and peace allowed the mind to seek for different challenges. She could not guess what they were, but she sensed them in the very air. Would she come to know them? Would they be hers? I just think that idea is so gorgeous. The idea that when we're stripped of any kind of darkness or sadness, that then frees us up to explore mysteries that we can't even conceive of. I thought that was a really beautiful description of what it would feel like to be in a place like that. Anyway, they follow the unicorn for several days, and eventually Tanaquil looks back and realizes that everywhere that they've stepped, her and the Peeve, everywhere that they've stepped, everything they've touched has turned rotten and looks like it's burned. And she freaks out and decides that they need to leave. And so she immediately turns back, and the unicorn dashes towards them and seems to bless both of them. It touches its horn to Tanaquil, and it licks the peeve, which is kind of funny. And so they end up saying goodbye to it, and they leave. And as they're going through the portal, Tanaquil sees that the path is starting to heal, which makes her feel better about things. And so when she gets outside and she's back in her world, she destroys the portal so that nothing can wander back out and get stuck, and that nothing can go in and mess that place up. And so she ends up falling asleep, and she wakes up and the next day, and the princess and a congregation from the castle or the kingdom have come, and they're asking for forgiveness from the unicorn because they don't know the unicorn's gone yet, and they think that the unicorn is just going to continue to terrorize people in the city for some reason that they don't understand. And so they're trying to, I guess, calm it by placing offerings at the portal. And so they end up seeing Tanaquil, and the advisor is there who tried to kill her earlier, and he tries to kill her again, and they throw spears at her, and the soldiers try and step on the peeve, and there seems to be some kind of force field preventing any harm from coming to her or the peeve, and they end up running in fear. Everyone does except the princess, and it's Tanaquil and the princess again. And I think the princess's name is Lizra. I can't remember. I've been calling her the princess the whole review. I'm so sorry. But it's just the two of them stuck on the beach again, just like they were at the ceremony where everyone fled from the unicorn when it set fire to everything. And the princess ends up taking Tanaquil back to just see what's become of their father. And she has Tanaquil essentially dress in disguise, and she needs to show Tanaquil that her father is essentially broken, that what happened at the ceremony somehow had a demoralizing effect on the prince, and it's become clear that the people of the kingdom have lost faith in the prince, and it seems that the princess is now going to have to step up, I should say, and start running things. And so Tanaquil wants to basically continue seeing the world, and so they say goodbye. It's a tearful goodbye. It seemed like they had started to become close. That was another thing I wanted to comment on, which is that the way that Tanith Lee describes their interaction, you really felt this awkward quality, which is that what I mean by that is that they were really excited to discover they were sisters, and you could tell that they had a lot of things in common, but that their upbringings had been so wildly different. They were both raised by single parents, and those parents had such wildly different personalities that in an odd way, that gap that the parents had with one another seemed to almost be transferred to the children. And so there was it was sort of almost like opposing magnets, you could tell. The princess was a little bit like the prince, and Tanaquil was a little bit like her mom. And so they felt a closeness, but there was sort of an awkward distance between them. So anyway, they say goodbye, and Tanaquil decides that she's going to continue on and have other adventures. And she sends a note to her mom letting her know that she's okay. And this is what I really liked about the book, is that the message seemed to be really simple. As Tanaquil is setting off on the road by herself, she now feels a lot more confident. She has her own camel. She's got her own money with her. She's got her familiar, and she's excited about what the future is going to bring. And a big part of that is that instead of leaving the perfect world and then becoming bitter and sad about all the imperfections in her own world, it actually seemed like the real blessing that the unicorn gave her was in her optimistic viewpoint on the world. Tanaquil explicitly sets out hoping to make the world better, and thinks to herself that while she wasn't born in the perfect universe, she can do what she can to make it better. And I thought that was a really amazingly simple but powerful message to put out there. And the fact that this, I don't know if you would call it YA. I know that Deb at Omnivorous Reader said that some people have called this YA. I really enjoyed this. It happens to be about a young person. But what I like about this is that, you know, if teenagers do read this, I feel like it strikes a really good balance of dealing with, you know, adult issues, but it doesn't go so far that it's inappropriate. And I really enjoyed that message of hope at the very end. I thought that that was absolutely a heroic takeaway from her experience. There is a moment when she left the perfect world where she felt a flash of bitterness, but she got over it and she moved on, and she's going to carry that memory with her. It sounds like almost as a guide to try and do the right thing in the future. And I thought that was really fantastic. So anyway, this book's amazing. I can't recommend it enough. Tanith Lee is fantastic. Hopefully I did a good job talking about this. If there's any Tanith Lee that you recommend that I check out, let me know. I'm super excited to read as much of her stuff as I can, and I'll see you in the next video.